I'm Andre Witte, I'm MD of the SaaS division of Nebula, and today with me I've got Brett Mealor. He's our Executive of Technology, and he's been with our business for over 6 years now, working on different technologies, on different customers, and also on our different products. And today we're going to unpack some of that journey together. Welcome, Brett.
Thank you very much, Andre.
Thank you. We were chatting just before this about how we visualize our technologies that we're going to adopt, that we're trialing, and you brought in something really interesting into the business, called the Tech Radar. Help me understand this, help me unpack this, and share a bit with our viewers about that.
Cool, awesome. Yeah, glad to do that. So Technical Radar as a concept, we took from ThoughtWorks,
yes.
Large company that's kind of focuses on the technical industry, and they have their own technical radar where they highlight, interesting tech on the roadmap,
right.
And just things that most businesses should be aware of, and as streams into their business.
Right.
And we adopted that to kind of visualize our technical strategy, as you mentioned before, and just to map out the level of adoption of this tech in our kind of roadmap, and into our product roadmaps.
Right. And you mentioned as well that those come from industry, but they also come from internal, and they go across DevOps, QA. It's really our full development landscape. So you mentioned kind of that adopt being in the center, and that's something we're actively working on. Unpack that a little bit. What are some of the technologies in the center of that adopt circle for us, and maybe some of the newer things that are making their way up?
Yeah, sure. I'll just use a couple of examples, maybe just to highlight it. So we'll get so the various inputs would be like external and internal, like you mentioned. So external being a source from Microsoft or a podcast or something along those lines, and that would just highlight a new technology, say like blockchain or something like that.
Right.
And then we would pull that into our roadmap, most likely in the assess ring of the Tech Radar. And in that ring we would have to go and do a hackathon or some sort of internal forum discussion, either architecture, DevOps. There's quite a few forums that we have, just to assess the nature of the technology and how it would benefit the company. Does it align with our technical strategy? Being cloud native and wanting to be agile, and that kind of core fundamentals.
That's right. Yeah.
And
kind of our core principles that we use to assess all the tech.
100%. And then once we get to that point, it will go through the various rings of the Technical Radar. So from assess into trial, trial being that we've actually gone and incorporated into a client project or a production environment. Okay. And we're assessing it in the environment. And once we're happy, we then go into the adopt ring, where we've decided, okay, we want to roll this out to throughout our clients and throughout the business. Yeah, so that was quite a big heated discussion over the last couple of months. So we've been using MVC for quite a long period of time.
That's right.
Kind of at the end of its lifespan at the moment. So we had a big project to kind of decide what the success of that will be, and that was we're kind of harking back to using either Angular or React or Blazor.
Right. And
so each of those was essentially placed into that assess ring, and hackathons and discussions around what was kind of best to take forward as a standardized front-end framework.
Right.
And I think that went through quite a few iterations and discussions. A lot of kind of existing knowledge that we have in the teams is actually in the Angular side.
Sure.
So that kind of helped to push us in that direction.
Fair enough.
Also just being the stability of that framework. React was obviously another contender, but Blazor being too new to market kind of prevented us from going down that route, even though it had Microsoft's backing.
I guess the lack of community support of that technology.
Exactly. So it's very new, not that much forums, information around it, and kind of the components. It's very young community. Exactly. Right. Yeah. So I think also in terms of Angular, it just has a lot more support, and it's kind of more targeted at the industries. It's a better, I want to say, handheld experience, but it's very structured in your approach to development. So it really kind of guides you down best practices.
Okay.
Which I felt that we needed.
For sure. And being involved in, I guess, recruiting talent into our teams, we're also finding that certain technologies are more freely available in the market and others are not, either not at all and needing to be trained, or they're too old and people are actively trying to steer away from that and don't want to join a company that are still working on those technologies. along the same lines, we've also had to make a choice with you and the team around moving from Service Fabric to Kubernetes. How do we go about that decision making, and again, how do you foresee actually rolling that out and implementing that, across the different teams where we are using Service Fabric?
Right, yeah, so Service Fabric was also another interesting kind of scenario there, where we were developing a lot of applications in that environment. Right. And the issue, one of the issue, but like it's very targeted at the Service Fabric environment. So you're actually developing on a specific SDK. Right. And it's not that you can just lift and shift a Service Fabric application into a more generic scenario. Right. So there was that consideration, and then there was also that we're just having some performance issues, and it's a bit of a black box in terms of how your applications work. We were specifically using an actor pattern there, so it's very difficult to nail down the communication and how things are being spun up in that kind of scenario. Okay. And then, from there, we started reaching out to Microsoft for a bit more clarification and support. Right. And found that we weren't getting that much engagement from them on the Service Fabric front. And kind of cut to the end there, they basically advised us moving to Kubernetes because they're basically discontinuing support of Service Fabric. So, so that kind of really helped our decision to kind of make that jump.
And I guess the key learning there is keeping up to date with what the big guys are doing, having the relationship with them to ask the honest question, and then hopefully getting the honest answer, so that you can inform your roadmap, not to fix it today, but how do we make decisions going forward.
And I think so. I think in terms of the big industry players are obviously moving to Kubernetes. I mean, it's been around for so long, and it's become like almost the industry standard for what we were trying to accomplish, having that like kind of orchestration of services and things like that. That's right. So it made sense. We were always toying with the idea of going there. That response from Microsoft was just that last kind of push to make us go in that direction.
The last push off the cliff.
Exactly. More like the cliff kind of tumbled out from underneath.
From underneath you, and where is that used? I mean, share with some of our viewers just where is that most prevalent in our technology stack, and where would they most likely use it in theirs?
In terms of Service Fabric, or
in terms of Kubernetes, or AKS, Kubernetes containerized environment.
Okay, sure. I mean, I'm not sure if we're going to go into discussion of containers themselves, but that's just a very good approach to kind of generalizing your services so they can run in any environment, run them locally, or in Azure and AWS, or in Kubernetes for the specific scenario.
Fair enough.
And then Kubernetes itself is more like an orchestration environment where it handles all your microservices, how they interact with each other, and just the availabilities of the services as well, like deploying to them, make sure that they're healthy, and do the incremental rollovers of the new versions. Right. So just handling all that for you, and then also kind of constraining the cost as well. So you're paying for just that cluster, and then being able to scale dynamically the number of services or things running in that environment as well. So it gives you a lot of power in terms of managing your environment and automated deployments, and making sure your services are healthy.
Makes sense. And I guess because it's got such a big support base, it allows you to do that both on-prem and into cloud. So it really opens up a lot of options for you.
Yeah, definitely. And it also had one of the huge benefits we have as well is that now that we have this platform, we can actually move into more a SaaS model, being able to dynamically spin up new instances or sandbox environments for our clients. So we'll have a kind of a template application, and then we create a template deployment where we can plug in specific client attributes and then just spin up a new instance of that service, which would be a lot more difficult in like if it was just a dedicated web app, and then creating another web app would be a lot more complicated.
For sure. And you were around when we made that first decision to move into Azure, that first, I guess, weekend where we needed to move everything across. I guess what does a key reflection coming back from that time, if you think back to that, and how do you even view it now? If we hadn't have made that transition, what kind of environment do you think this would look like? So keen to get your just general perspective on that cloud move.
Sure. I mean, it's obviously like looking back, it feels so long ago, almost like 5-6 years ago we made that move. But just always like developing and being constrained by our environment and not having the flexibility to do something or try something new.
The environment being the hardware environment, our actual hosting partners environment.
Exactly. And onboarding like new clients, we couldn't do it because we physically didn't have enough resources. We had to ask for another server to be spun up before we can. and spreading our servers across different like actual physical machines and then linking them together was also a bit of a nightmare.
Right.
So yeah, once we made that move, it just really opened up like possibilities in terms of like what we could do. It would be a lot more agile in terms of like our delivery as well, and just all the cloud native functionality as well really opened up doors in terms of like web jobs and web apps and kind of those core platforms or core libraries that we could use that where you had to kind of do a lot of manual work in our environment or in a physical environment. You can leverage like the cloud native functionality, so it really helped open up some doors and possibilities.
And being involved in a lot of the architecture of all the applications, both custom and the product side, I guess that's helpful to have a much wider menu of services that you can choose from than, okay, I have to solve this using MVC, C#, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, it's always, I suppose, tough in terms of cloud because there's many ways of accomplishing something. So it's kind of getting that exposure, playing with the different tech, and then once you kind of comfortable in the environments, you've done some certifications as well, definitely helps. But then you can actually go and look and say, what is the best way to architect the solution? What is break it down into its really core components and solve it like, the simplest kind of solution is normally best in that situation.
Right. And you've been involved in some of the, not involved in the actual project, but come in after the fact, where a client has gone down a cloud-first approach, implemented something, and it hasn't worked out quite as they planned, maybe because of the types of technologies or some of the decisions that were made along the line. What are one or two of the takeaways that came out of that you would say, someone who's gone cloud, who maybe has implemented the application and are kind of a bit stuck right now, how would they approach it? What are one or two of the key things for them to have a look at that would maybe unlock some of the benefits for them?
Yeah, I mean, we've had scenarios like you mentioned where people struggled a bit in their first move to the cloud. They decided to go cloud firstly, chose a particular application type, and then made the move, but then spent a long time implementing their solution and then not adapting to the times. So they were basically running on version 1 of that platform, where version 3 had come out, and now they're running out to production and having various issues that have been patched out during that time. So I suppose in that case, it's just like the problem there is not reacting to the environment and being like fluid in terms of like, obviously Azure, it's changed a lot over the last 5 years. I mean, we've had version 1 portal, version 2. ARM was very new back then, so obviously you need to be more proactive in terms of reacting to change. But I think Microsoft generally is very good in terms of communicating that, and you do have like a year or two to kind of make that migration. And you can see that decision coming through now with .NET Core version 5 coming out, giving a lot of leeway or a lot of lead time into when that's going to be rolled out and what their plan with it is. And if you were, to kind of look back and if I can summarize what I'm hearing is that, starting off on a cloud project, don't make the decision up front and then never look at it again, kind of put the architecture book away and leave it be. But because you're in this cloud environment, assume that you're going to need to be keeping this up to date, even through your development cycle of one of your first projects. Yeah, I think that makes 100% sense. I think you obviously architect it up front, but if it's a 5-10 year project, you'll need to revisit that. And maybe, function apps are the latest craze today, but in a year's time, there might be a different alternative that you should actually look into. And I suppose you could take the risk of still going to production with that, but then maybe just build in a roadmap or contingency plan to move to the new framework.
Makes sense. And how do you and the team view something like the Build conference, Microsoft Build conference? How do you guys see that? How do you kind of onboard some of the feedback coming from there?
So I suppose that ties back to kind of the technology radar question. So it's basically an external source of information there. So ideally we'd all get the chance to kind of attend these conferences, but that's probably not going to happen nowadays. Maybe
certainly
virtually,
not 2021.
Virtually we can attend, but the idea being there, like new tech and ideas, we get that and plug that into the technology radar and then kind of spin off there, like the whole innovation cycle of, bringing that through to the adopt circle and kind of assessing new technology and hopefully incorporating it into the future as well.
Amazing. And one of my last questions, and then I'll go into a quick fire round. How do you build and develop with quality in mind? How do you approach that? How do you, frankly, to brag for you, how do you release such perfectly solid code all the time?
I just make sure you can't see the bugs.
Right.
Yeah, no, it's obviously like a lot of it comes down to design up front,
Okay.
making sure we have the correct structures to handle scale, and just to fully cover like the complexity of the issue, like making sure we cover for all the scenarios.
Okay.
And then it also comes down to the QA team as well. Like they have their inputs in terms of what level of automation we want to have in place. Obviously, from a dev perspective, we want to make sure we have as much coverage as possible in terms of unit tests and things like that. But building on from that, having integration tests, testing transactions from end to end, testing our APIs, UI tests as well. Right. As much as we can test, building that into actually our estimates as well. So we bake in the quality up front. Instead of kind of retroactively later on trying to test everything, which never works out very well.
Never does. Thank you. Some quick fire questions and then we'll wrap up. So first one, Azure or AWS?
Azure.
The second one, do you prefer, and I think you gave it away already, Angular or Blazor?
Angular.
Fair enough. Given the choice, what would your favorite or first go-to resource be in Azure?
In terms of like a component or like just
your favorite one, the
base.
one you enjoy working with?
At the moment, I'd say Kubernetes, AKS.
Kubernetes, very cool. And then are you Apple or Android?
I'm Apple.
Nice.
Unfortunately.
Thank you very much, Brett. Thanks for your time. Great to chat.